Hey guys, it's Carly.
Hey everybody, it's Shamina. And
We're emotionful. They only heard me.
I know because I didn't speak because usually my voice is much more overpowering and people hear me. So
That's a first.
I was thinking before I spoke because I recognize that your voice doesn't get heard as much as mine when we do the intro.
Thank you.
Speaking of
Yeah.
thinking before we speak, that is
I'm
today's
getting there.
topic of choice. Basically, like impulse control is the generalized topic that we are discussing today. This is another topic that was brought to us from one of our viewers. So thank you all for continuing to engage with us and provide us feedback on topics and different types of discussions that you're interested in and you want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, and before we jump in, I want to say how awesome it is with how much feedback we've been getting back. Like, even if it's just like certain people have like just maybe giving us little ideas or people saying they'd be down to be a guest whenever, like you the real MVPs. No, but it's exciting. It's like, growing a little bit. I was talking about it with my sister-in-law. She's like, that's how it's having an impact on people, that they're reaching out now and you're not having to like you're not always having to think of like, oh, what are we going to talk about, because viewers are giving us feedback. So a little snippet, but now before we begin as well, let's shout out some of our peeps. We got
So we want to thank our patrons, Kevin Gallagher, Therese Gallagher, and Joanne Stewart, for your continued support through Patreon. So thank you all so much. If you are interested in becoming one of our patrons or wanting to support us in that way, check out our Patreon page.
send us your monies. No, I'm kidding.
We would
Kinda.
greatly appreciate any financial support that you could provide.
Shamina says it nicely. Give me the money, bitch. All right, just kidding.
So let's get
Fully emotionally full.
okay.
What I had.
All right. So, impulse control.
Yes.
This is something I personally do not have a problem with because not that I don't have a problem with it, I don't have much experience with it because I don't like to speak as it is. I'm very introverted. I'm very shy when people first meet me. If I'm in a group setting, I
So
have.
let me take over. No, I'm kidding. That was an example though. So I had to do it because it was an example, but let Shamina finish and then for real, I'll take over.
So, as you can tell in our episodes, Carly does have some type of struggle with impulse control because she does interrupt quite often, but it's part of her character. She's getting much
Um,
better.
Thank you. Can we please acknowledge my growth? That
Yes.
was rude. No,
From
but
season one to season two, there's been significant progress and growth in Carly's impulse control. So, we want to celebrate that. Yes. But, anyways, back to me for now. Excuse me. My dog's trying to eat one of the So, I even, like I was saying, in a group setting, even, or like at work, I have anxiety as it is. And so I'm constantly like going in my head over and over what I'm going to say. So I feel prepared enough to say it. So I don't even have the time to just immediately say something. Um, so that's my own
see,
personal experience.
I'm the opposite. I think that, and when I think about it, I think I just am so excited to like say my feelings and my thoughts. I will say that I think I have been getting better now that I'm trying to like be aware of my emotions and like not taking over a conversation and things like that. But I just like when I relate to someone and something like that. So for me, I think the impulse control comes from being excited. I don't think I ever speak impulsively from anger, but one memory that brings back, and I don't know if you'll remember, in high school, my English teacher, I remember she even when we first started this podcast, when she would share our stuff, she shared like a memory of how she remembers when I would be in English class and like she would ask if like we had questions or whatever, and I'd be like, yes, I do. Can you like better explain this? And she was like, you were always like so quick with asking a question. I'm like, yeah, because like when something comes to my head, I feel like I need to immediately get it out or I'm gonna forget it. And I think that's why I struggle with impulse control, because I'm always like, and I think it's because I'm like excited. So I'm like, oh, I gotta tell you about this point that you said that makes sense. So I need you to stop talking so I can hurry up and tell you about this point. But I think like from going through what I'm going through and like learning to control my emotions and things like that, I'm learning that like kind of take it like a step back and be more present and intentional and things like that. So what I was telling Shamina is, um, it's like a habit I think you have to build, like how we can be better at impulse control is just like building this habit. I was saying to Shamina of like, kind of work on it with people that you're comfortable with and that you're okay if like they call you out on it, of like, with Shamina, even I remember when I first went through the breakup. Do you remember, Shamina, when I was just talking and just talked about this today too, and you were just like, Karlie, I can't keep talking about him. And I'm glad that you said that, because it was like an eye opener for me of like, wow, I really do only talk about him when we're together. And yeah, that probably is exhausting. But I feel like that helped me in every other one of my relationships with my friends, because then I stopped bringing him up. And at the end of the day, it even helped me, because if I'm not always talking about him, then I'm soon not going to even think about him, like, through a slow process. But
So when we say impulse control, I want to make this distinction clear. We're specifically talking about thinking before you speak, because there's a wide variety of the spectrum that falls into impulse control, like people spending or having like risk-taking behaviors, those types of things. So we're less talking about those specifics when it comes to like the umbrella of impulse control, and more of impulsively like speaking before you're thinking about it, and then you're like, oh shit, what did I just get myself into?
And I probably think this is not like the ideal answer, but I feel like it's trial and error, like we're gonna have moments like where we speak before we think, and then we probably are biting our tongue because we're either embarrassed because we either called someone out or we did something. But I guarantee you'll remember that moment because you probably felt like so embarrassed or however you felt, because I know I've had instances where I'm like, oh my god, did I just say that? And like,
Yeah.
and I probably said something not thinking anyone in the room related to it, and then they did, and it's like, oh shit. So like, I think that's like kind of a trial and error too, of like, but like,
So with that, it sparked a memory as to probably why I am very reserved when I talk, and I now make it a big point to think before I speak. So I was in 7th grade. I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast or not, but I talk about it in other areas. So I
don't know, I'm excited to hear.
7th grade social studies. And in my middle school, there was this particular teacher who had a reputation. This man was scary as shit. You did not want to even cross paths with this man, because like everybody in school knew that he had a reputation. Even if you weren't his student, he would like get on your ass, or get you in trouble, or enforce the rules, or whatever. So among like the kids, there was this big like stigma He was very scary, very intimidating looking. The story was that allegedly he doesn't blink. Like, people had timed his blinking and he could go like 30 minutes without blinking, and that was like really terrifying for people. Apparently I did have him, so I don't remember.
Time him?
Huh?
Did you time his blinks?
Probably not, because I was too terrified of just him as a person. I was like, please, I'm a good girl. Please don't yell at me. So I was sitting in his class. I have no idea what we were talking about or what I even said, but I said something absolutely ridiculous. And the second that it came out of my mouth, I thought, oh my God, what the fuck did I just say? So this particular teacher, in my middle school, we had what we called like pods. So there were 4 classrooms connected with like a common area, so you could like literally just like walk through and you'll go into your next class. And that was kind of how we had like teams, so that's how they were like separated, was like those were like our 4 core classes, like math, social studies, science, and language arts were all like together. So this particular teacher told me to get up, and he walked me around to my other 3 teachers, and I had to repeat this ridiculous thing that I said. And for the life of me, I literally can't tell you what it was that I said. But from that moment on, you bet your ass that I never spoke out of turn in his class unless I was called on, because he was super big on participation. So after that, that was a little challenging for me to do, because I was scared of him. And even in school, in groups, in work, in whatever the fuck it was, that is why I think before I speak. I repeat it over and over and over again to make sure that it makes sense, to make sure that what I'm going to say is eloquent. My face gets really hot. If I have to sit in like a group and I know that I want to say something, my heart starts racing, my face gets really hot, it gets very red, which is embarrassing, because then people can tell like I'm activated. And it's like my stress response is like, we're gonna go, like we're gonna fight, and all I have to do is literally like participate or speak. This even happened when I was in college too, like if I wanted to say something. So I think that experience taught me like, bitch, don't ever fucking do that.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I have this one memory, my family will not let me live it down, and it's like, bro, come on. But I was driving in the car and like I was just talking whatever, and I was like, what is beef made from, and then I was like, what is chicken made from? And my brother was like, oh my God, you don't know what chicken's made of? And then like it was like chicken, and like to this day they'll bring up that I asked what chicken is made out of, and I'm just like, okay. And like it's funny you were talking about like getting nervous, because I think I get nervous. I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at talking in groups, because with my job I had to do it a lot. But we took a public speaking class together. I did not like it then, but I remember once in high school, I don't remember if I was speaking in class or something happened. I was in a classroom, I was talking to this dude, and he did something that embarrassed me, and like I'm super white, so like when I get embarrassed it's like easily, and he was like, oh my God, you're all embarrassed, you're all red, and I was like, oh my God, Karlie, just stop being red. And I just I can't help it, I'm freaking like pasty white, so you immediately can tell when I'm like blushing. But that's never stopped me, I still keep going, baby. Can't tear me down. Can't tear me down.
And I have gotten better through the exposure, and public speaking isn't really that big of an issue. Or like, like in high school, I had to give a speech for graduation or whatever. I like being the center of attention, but as long as I know what I'm going to say and it's prepared.
Yeah, but I think in terms of like anger, I think sometimes we're so quick to respond, because remember how I think I've said it on past episodes that anger is this secondary emotion. And so I know Shamina's told me this, but I think
to take credit. I taught her this.
Technically TikTok did, but we'll give Shamina credit. But so like with anger being a secondary emotion, I think most times behind anger is like you're hurt or sad. And so it's almost like a defense mechanism of like
almost it is.
Well, no, not I mean like most times the true emotion is like sadness or hurt, but it could be something else of like disappointment, embarrassment, but like it's along those emotions, I would say. And so I think that the reason why we're so quick to immediately respond is it's like a coping mechanism and of like, you didn't hurt me, but because you did hurt me, but I'm not going to tell you that, I'm going to hurt you back. And so you just like immediately will, and so you don't think because you're like immediately like, I think it goes back to you don't want, no, people don't want to feel sad and things, so we do what we can to not feel that way. And when you feel like you're being attacked, what's our immediate nature? To attack back and retaliate, instead of just taking that quick second, reminding ourselves that they're probably coming at us because they're hurt, they're hurting, they're sad, and let's not take immediate personal offense to this. Let's take a split second, think about what they're saying, and then go from there.
Yes, I agree. So let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. So, I got a cat.
You and your cats.
They're hungry and they want to be fed. So I got one who's swimming behind me on the desk going.
Oh my God.
So anyways, Karlie is 100% correct that most of the time when we respond with anger, they're underneath, it's kind of like the iceberg. So on top of the water is the anger, and then underneath are all the other types, all the other usually negative emotions that we're actually experiencing, but the anger comes out and the anger comes through because it's easier to get angry than it is to feel hurt or rejected or embarrassed or disappointed, what have you. So with that, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Wasn't because of me.
I know, these damn cats. So when that does happen, Karlie's right, is that we kind of learn it's like a defense mechanism. It's a coping skill because it's easier to respond with anger than to sit and identify like, how am I actually feeling? How did this make me feel? And so we usually, again, are very impulsive with our speech, and we just say something right afterwards, which can at times get us in trouble, because if you get emotionally activated, when that happens, the frontal lobe, which is the lobe in the front of our brains, and if you're younger than 25, that part of your brain hasn't even fully formed yet, and that part of our brain,
disclaimer, longer for men. No, I'm just kidding, but it feels like it.
Yeah, yeah. Stop it.
I know, I hear them in the speaker. That's going to be like the main audio of our podcast, of our episode. This one is of a cat
swimming. Anyway, so the frontal lobe, until you're up until the age of 25, is not even fully formed yet, because our brain forms from the back to the front. So for our viewers who are younger than 25, great. So the frontal lobe is responsible for executive functioning, reasoning, logic. That's kind of the powerhouse of rational behavior, rational thought, all of those types of things. So when we get emotionally activated, this part of the brain stops working and is not receiving. I'm trying. I'm trying. Stop.
Put them down. Put him on the floor.
I can't. She'll scratch me. So that part of the brain stops. Ow. Pause. Hang on. Get down. All right. So it's risky business touching a cat when it's hungry, man.
Well, I don't have cats.
Yeah, we know. So that part of the brain we've seen that it does not receive any signals anymore, and it gets rerouted to a different part of our brain called the amygdala, and this is responsible for our emotions. It's tied to like memory, trauma stuff can be in there as well, but the amygdala is very impulsive, very primal, very animalistic, very instinctual. So it's just like immediately responds and reacts. So it's very interesting, and I talk to my clients a lot about this, because that's why when we get upset or we argue with somebody, we say things that we don't mean, and then when we calm back down, we think like, oh wow, like why did I do that, or why did I say that, I shouldn't have done that. Well, it's because the part of the brain that's supposed to control those impulses literally is not firing, not working, out of commission, on vacation, see you next week.
So I have a question though, because is there a way to, so I guess my question is, the only way to improve that is to learn how to not immediately get worked up, is what you're saying? Because I feel like if I was in a relationship with someone and they're constantly like getting upset and saying things to me, and then like their brain shuts off, but then when it turns back on, they're like, I'm so sorry, like that gets old. And I'd be like, okay, like figure it out then, so like, would the best practice be to practice how to not become upset when someone says something to you that you don't like? Or
no, I mean, that's unrealistic. We're gonna
yeah.
get upset regardless, but the helpful part is, one, recognizing when it's happening, and I talk about, recognition, identification, all that kind of stuff, recognizing when it's happening, and then depending on the intensity of the emotions that now you're experiencing, whether you're the person who's giving or receiving the verbal words or whatever, it's about being able to calm back down the amygdala. So once the amygdala fires and it's very active, that's where we get like the stress response. That's where we get like super heated and all of that kind of stuff, like the fight, flight, freeze response. That's the amygdala firing and saying like danger, danger, danger. Even in conversations with people, even our close partners, if somebody's tone is a certain way or somebody says something in a way, that can immediately trigger the stress response, and now the amygdala is firing, and it's hard to kind of think like rationally and logically during that time. So it's more about slowing down the process and grounding yourself in ways to quiet down the amygdala, quiet down the nervous system, so you're able to regain control and be back in charge of your thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but because I was trying to think of like if I've ever experienced that, but it makes sense, and it just sounds like it's something capable of being done, but it sounds like it is, you have to be very intentional, and it's gonna be a lot of practice. Because like I'm thinking, and I feel like I'm sure I have instances, but nothing's coming to my head right now of like personal experiences. But just like I think for me, something I thought about like in the future possibly is like maybe when like because you had mentioned tone. So like maybe when someone says something to me, I think maybe, maybe the way they say it could really upset me. But if I respond and say something of like, the way you said it is upset, like I think acknowledging it, but maybe even saying it out loud sometimes of like, hey, I'm feeling some type of way right now because the way that you said it, I don't know if this is what you meant, but this is how it's making me feel. And I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So, and this can happen in any situation, whether it's like friends, family, relationships, your employer. I mean, how many times do you have like a really shitty like manager or boss, and they say something to you, or they say it in like a really insulting or degrading way, and then instantly you're like pissed off or you feel attacked, and so you want to respond to like defend yourself. And then if it's in a job setting, that's a little more like high risk, I guess, because you could get fired. So it's more, yes, what you had said, like it is a process, but it does take practice and consistency. Even, I'm a therapist. I've been in therapy myself for 4 years. Like I have, all of the things, but I can't even do it all of the time. And I don't expect myself to do it because you're a human being. And sometimes you're going to lose your temper, or you're going to say something that you don't mean. You're not going to be able to catch it. And sometimes, like if my partner and I argue, I do have a pretty strong awareness of what's happening, and I may be able to recognize it. And I have this choice. I can kind of ground myself and calm down, or I say, like, fuck it. And I'm going in as well. And sometimes I choose that, and I actively choose, like, I could, like, I'm getting heated, like, I need to calm down. And I'm like, not today. Today's not the day that's going to happen. And there have been times where, usually in arguments or with confrontation, I shut down. And that's kind of like my go-to, my coping, and then I have to like ground and blah blah blah. But there are times where I don't, because I'm like, you know what, I'm tired of this shit, and then I'll go in and what have you, and then afterwards I'm like, I guess I shouldn't have done that because that made things worse. But so
I think though, as long as you said, like, it's not like you're always popping off, of like,
yeah.
because if it's every once in a while, it's like, okay, like you said, you're human. I don't expect you to be able to constantly maintain yourself and your feelings all of the time. But if you're like always not able to maintain yourself in situations where you're mad or upset or whatever it is, it's like, bro, like, okay, for instance, like I have a friend back in the day when we would drink. I did not like drinking with her because every time she got drunk, it was just like, oh my God. Like it would be a negative experience in the sense of something was happening because she was going in and like in a way of like, it was just like, oh God. So it was like we would dread that.
How is that tied to what we're talking about? I missed that point.
Because it's like of like a like if it's every single time, it gets
Oh,
old,
yeah,
but
yeah.
if it's like a once in a while, then it's like, okay, that's more tolerable. But it's like when every single time that this is how this person is going to act out when they're upset, people don't want to be around you.
Right, right. So I think that's again where like the awareness comes in, and like recognizing like, hey, sometimes I think before I speak a little more than I'd like to. I also think kind of identifying, like recognizing that, one, you do it, and then the other part is to recognize when it's happening in the moment. And this is a little more challenging for people because when we're that emotionally high end, whether it's like negatively or positively, like Karlie had said, like she'll get very excited, that's still like a sense of emotion, like you're getting flooded with different types of like hormones or neurotransmitters or what have you. And so
Mhm.
even in those moments, we have to recognize like, oh my gosh, I need to slow it down. I am doing this. I'm about to say something, like I'm just gonna go for it. So it takes like that time of, again, like slowing things down and recognizing when it's happening in the moment, and then being able to do something. Because if you have no awareness that you even do it, it's going to be very hard to make those changes because you have no idea. And I think that's where Karlie was talking about, like, and it's a really great skill to kind of try, is like having your support system hold you accountable and start kind of pointing it out in a really gentle way. If you do say something like, hey, I know you talked about like wanting to, control like when you talk before when you speak before you think. Am I saying that right? When you think before, when you
When you
speak.
speak before you think.
Yes. And this was one of those times when you did that. And so if other people start to point it out, you'll gain more awareness and insight. So you'll be able to do that, which is very helpful. And it holds you accountable for other people that you trust. And then once that's established, you can start beginning to kind of recognize when it's happening in the moment, and then implementing some type of like behavioral changes, or identifying those emotions that are going on for you that may be causing the impulsive response.
So 100%. But as you were talking, can I just say, the whole time I was thinking of, what is it, the seven stages of change, or 5 stages of change, however many, because y'all, you can't expect yourself to change overnight. So literally, like, the first stage of change, oh gosh. The first stage of change is like, what is it? Like, just
Contemplation.
yeah, so you're literally just thinking about it. So you've not done anything. You're thinking like, I want to change. And then the second stage is like acknowledging.
Contemplation.
Yeah, so then you're like actively thinking about it and noticing it, but it takes a little bit before you actually make those changes. You know, are you laughing at me?
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just remembering what happened. And then I was laughing. My cat tried jumping on something and she missed. So she's holding on with her front paws, struggling for dear life, and she can't get traction. So she's just like, help me, please.
I'm over here spitting words of wisdom.
You're right. My bad. So 5 stages of change: pre-contemplation, then contemplation.
Yeah, anyways, I don't remember where I was at, but just remember to, like, as you're trying to make these changes, to also be gentle with yourself. You're not going to change overnight. And I believe one of the stages of change is even like a relapse of, like, you're not going to be perfect all of the time. There's going to be a time where you'll like slip up or whatever, you know? And so to know that when you do, because it will happen, that that's okay, as long as, like, you know, what Shamina said of like, sometimes she'll be in the moment, she knows she could choose to be calm, but she's going to choose the other route, and that's okay, as long as that's not the route she chooses every single time she's getting into an argument with her partner, because then I'm sure that her partner would get annoyed with her. So anyways, when you're changing who you are, it's not easy, but don't give up.
When you're changing previous behaviors, not necessarily who you are. Language is important.
How did I know you were gonna freaking say language? I knew you were gonna say language. Yes, when you're changing qualities or whatever Shamina said.
Behaviors or thought processes. It is definitely a challenge, and it's not linear by any sense of the word. There's, you know, it's very cyclical, and so be patient with yourself. Some tips and tricks that you could try.
Wait, before you do the tips and tricks, can I just say it? One thing that I think is like, that I've noticed lately is sometimes when you don't think that you're making changes, in that moment, it might not feel that way, but then if you look back a month from then, like, and you look back, and you'll be like, wow. So even if, you know, on certain days you're like, I'm just stagnant or whatever, I guarantee you'll look back and you'll be like, oh wow, I had a lot of growth, because you're not going to experience it every single day. But if you're consistent, you do little steps when you can, you don't push yourself, you'll see it and you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my God, I remember when I was in that moment and I thought nothing was happening. And now I'm a month later and I've grown so much.
Excuse me. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Consistency is definitely the most important piece when trying to make any type of change, because, you know, it's like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once and then you're like, I'm super fit, I met all my fitness goals, I look amazing. You have to go and keep going. And same thing, you know, with any aspect of who you are or what you're doing, trying to implement some type of change, you have to be consistent.
But consistency doesn't always mean like going hard or going home, because I think sometimes when people think of consistency, they don't think of it as like little baby steps. You know, it's like, at least for me, I used to think of it kind of like go hard or go home. Like, if I went to the gym, I'd have to work out until I was sore. And now I'm like, no, because when I did do that, I didn't go back to the gym for like 3 months. So it it didn't work.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. And you know, it's not about intensity, it's about duration. Like, how long are you committing to that goal? Is it like a week? Is it 3 weeks? Is it 6 months? And so the duration matters, not the intensity. So now tips and tricks.
You may proceed.
So one thing I do want to highlight that Karlie said, so if you are in a position where maybe other people have told you like, hey, like you've gotten this feedback from others, like, hey, you do this a lot, or, did you know that you do that? And you're not in a position that you're like, yeah, I know that I do that. Something that could be helpful is, again, like having your support system or people that you're around and that you trust, being able to point out some of those times where that does happen, because that will help increase your own awareness. Obviously, you don't want somebody to be an asshole and be like, bro, you just said that and that was impulsive, and because then you're going to shut down, you're going to feel shame, you're going to feel judgment, all that kind of stuff. So just being like, hey, like, I remember you talked about wanting to like make some of these changes. Like, I just want to point out like what you had just said seemed to be like a little impulsive, or did you think before you like open your mouth, or whatever, however softly you can phrase that type of thing. So that's a really great way to start cultivating more of the insight and awareness if you have noticed that other people are kind of consistently like telling you and giving you that feedback. If you do already notice, hey, I do this thing, how do I make this stop, or I want to kind of change it. So again, kind of going back to like the slowing it down process, because we go through kind of these stages. It's not somebody says something and then we speak. We go through a series of stages, but it feels very fast forward and sped up. And so it's kind of being able to take a look at what is the stage. Like once somebody says something, then what happens? What's going on in your body that tells you that you're feeling different, or you may have gotten triggered, or you're feeling activated? What are the physiological changes that's happening? How do you know? Like for me, if somebody says something and I get upset, instantly I stop talking. My palms get sweaty, my heart starts racing, and my face gets hot, and I know that it gets red. And that's like my physiological like stages that I go through. What you laughing for?
Because I guess was picturing it, and then I was like thinking about when I get angry, and like when I get angry I stop talking, but I think I just stopped talking, and then in my head I'm like, fuck you, like
I do that. I have some self-talk going on, but I'm talking about physiological first.
I know, but so I was laughing at that because I was like, I thought of one specific time where someone like called me out in front of a whole bunch of people, and I got pissed, and I stayed real quiet the whole rest of the night. And when I'm quiet, people know something's up. I was quiet the whole night. I was like, okay, but in my head I was like,
fuck you, fuck them, fuck everybody.
Anyways, proceed.
So one, like recognizing the physiological changes that are happening. And then also like what Karlie was saying, what are you telling yourself? Like where is your dialogue going? What is the emotion that's also coming up for you? Because that's really important. I imagine, Karlie, in that circumstance, like you felt embarrassed and, because somebody called you out in front of everybody. And so recognizing the emotions that start to come up for you as well, because that's going to be an important piece. There may be specific types of emotions that are kind of the theme that you usually will speak before you think. Like if you feel embarrassed, that may happen, or if you feel attacked, that may happen, or like you have to defend yourself. Those types of things typically we see like people thinking before they speak because they feel some type of way and they want to defend themselves. So there's that, the self-talk and kind of the dialogue, because that's going to be important. Even though you're emotionally activated, you are still in control of your thoughts. Your thoughts do not get to control you, even though it feels that way. Your emotions do not get to control you. You get to be in control. And so when we're able to kind of recognize and identify, like, what are we telling ourselves? Are we kind of going down? I use this analogy a lot with my clients, but I talk about like a train. So I think of like our thoughts as they're trains constantly kind of going in and out of the train station or your head. And so we welcome the thoughts when they enter. And then when they leave, we get to leave and say goodbye, see you later. But we know that they come back because our thoughts are very cyclical and they tend to kind of cycle through our head. So there is a moment, and I use this example a lot again with my clients, but there's a moment where the thoughts come in, the trains come into the train station and they stop. And you are standing on the platform. And when the train stops, it opens its doors. And in that moment, you get to decide, do I enter the train and do I ride it and see where it takes me? Or do I allow it to close its doors and I wave as it leaves and you stay on the train station, you stay in control. And then you welcome it back as it comes back again. And I find the visualization helps with my clients, but also just the point in general is that we can recognize the emotions or the thoughts that we're having or the things that we want to say, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to hop on that train and ride it and see where it goes, because usually it may not go to the best place that we want it to be, or there may be some type of like negative consequence that happens after that. So recognizing some of those things, but again, also slowing it down. So if you do feel like you're about to say something and you know it's not going to be the best thing that you want to say, pause, count to 10, count to 5. I don't really care what you count to, but do something to be able to kind
catch an air bubble.
You're going to do that when you're talking to somebody. They're going to look at you like, what did you just do? So you could take deep breaths, because people can't notice when you take a deep breath. Like,
I noticed.
You knew I was doing it. Anyway, so I like that though. That's cute for kids, I feel like. Or adults.
Yeah. Judgy.
But taking deep breaths can be something, pairing that with counting. So maybe you're counting to 3 and taking a deep breath and then you speak. There's this particular intervention that my supervisor has talked to me about, and I really like it. It's called tense, observe, relax, observe. So basically you're intentionally tensing your muscles and relaxing them and observing kind of the sensation. And so something that could be really helpful is like in those moments, maybe you tense your fists and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to say something. This is ridiculous. And then you let go and you're like, oh, okay, I feel better now. And you're able to kind of like get out.
Again? Can you do that again? No, you need, oh my God,
I'm going to say something right now. My cat just looked at me like,
oh man.
So that could also
or
be something.
Just remember Shamina saying that and then it'll just lighten the mood.
Yes. What would Shamina say? This is my clients say. They're like, I have your voice in my head. What would Shamina say? What would Shamina do? I'm like, no, your voice, not mine. Anyway, so you could kind of tense the hands. I had one client once who told me that they kind of tap on their fingertips. And so that could also be something that you kind of do to help like ground yourself or kind of calm down in the moment. Something that's very quick and that you can do. There's also, this is like a whole nother episode type of thing, but it's called EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom technique. And it's basically processing our emotions, through our bodies. And there are specific types of tapping that you can do on your hand. So like on the karate chop part of your hand, like tapping on your hand, tapping on your knuckles, your fingers. And this can help, again, kind of like reground, recenter, and allow you to feel more in control. Or if you are going to say something and you know that you're going to, and you feel you have a like stronger relationship with this person, you can literally say like, I want to talk about this more, but I need to take a break from this conversation and I will be back in 5 minutes, or, just give me 30 minutes to kind of decompress and calm down, and we'll revisit this conversation. That's a really healthy way of de-escalating conflict and allowing yourself to self-soothe and self-regulate before coming back and addressing the situation. A lot of times we're not in a position like that, especially if it's in like a workplace. You can't like tell your boss like, hey, you just like activated me and I need like 5 minutes in order to give you some type of feedback. Like, hang on.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because one thing I remember that I used to do often. It wasn't really around anger, it was more of like sad hurt, but and it was more of like a build up and not like a confrontational thing. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I would write down how I was feeling and what I wanted to say, and then I would literally read it to my ex, and he hated it. He hated it because he knew, he was like, oh my God. But it helped me because in the moment I would get very nervous of like, oh my gosh. And so I would forget, but I would write it down and be like, I need to read you something, whether it was like in my phone or on a piece of paper. And I was like, hey, like I've been feeling this way for a while. Like I need to let you know how I'm feeling. And I would say like, is now a good time? Like, can I talk to you? And then I would literally read my letter that I wrote.
Yeah. And I've even had like clients who in session, they're like coloring or doodling or drawing or something because it helps to keep them calm when they're trying to talk about difficult like situations or emotions or what have you. And that's also something that can be helpful as long as you tell the person ahead of time, like, hey, I do this just to, otherwise they're like, why are you doing that? Like, yeah,
And they don't
you're
think you're like focused. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that. So that's also a couple of things to be able to do, but more so you could also kind of use like a grounding activity and doing something like very quickly, like with the senses, like what are things that you can smell, taste, touch, hear, and see to help kind of bring you back into the present moment and back into more of like a cognitive headspace instead of an emotional one. And that can be super helpful, and you can do that literally anywhere and just focusing on pieces of the senses. So a couple of tips and tricks to try. Any questions, Karlie?
No, I think that you gave like a good examples and that situation. I'm a lover, not a fighter, so I struggle with like the anger part because when I get angry, I shut down and I cry. I don't like
Lash out.
yeah, I don't lash out. I cry. Like I remember one time I got pulled over by a cop and he gave me a ticket and I was so pissed and I just started crying. And then I mean with him I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But then when we got into like when I pulled away, I was in the car with my mom and I was like, he was so mean and rude. And my mom's like, oh, now you're gonna say something, but I was like also crying because I was very upset. So I'm a crier. I don't lash out. I'm more of like, oh my God. And then I cry. And then afterwards I'll be like, I should have done this and I should have done that. But day late, dollar short.
Yeah. And I think Karlie had mentioned this to me earlier too, but also being very intentional with how present you are in the conversation. And I know for Karlie at times she listens to respond as soon as there's like something in her head. I gotta say this now, and then it's like game over for the rest of the conversation. And so like recognizing you won't be like, sometimes we forget the things that we want to say, but you can hold on to what you want to say and still be present and listening to the conversation, and then being able to respond when it's appropriate, I guess I don't know a better word than that, but
yeah. And I also am trying to work on learning of like, if it's that important to be included in the conversation, I won't forget it. So does that make sense? Like I'm trying to be more intentional of like, yeah, if a thought comes in, instead of focusing so hard on remembering that thought to bring it up, let me listen to the whole conversation. And if that thought still relates to it, I'm sure I'll remember it. And if I don't, it probably wasn't that important to the conversation. And it was more of just me wanting to talk. So I'm trying to like navigate that too.
definitely. So are you feeling full yet?
Yeah, I'm feeling full of water. No.
Anyway, if not, consider.
Oh, wait. Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
If not, consider this. we want to hear from you guys. How do you control your thoughts in order to speak in a constructive, healthy, communicative manner? What are some tips and tricks that you all use to help control your impulses when you want to say something in the moment?
And I specifically am interested in anger because I don't lash out when I'm angry. So I'm just curious of like y'all's coping or whatever. What?
Responses.
Thank you. I could not think of the word.
So let us know. Stay tuned because we are rapidly wrapping up with season 2. We only have one more episode, which will be our finale after this one.
And I think I just have been brainstorming by myself. I haven't even brought this up to Shamina, but I feel like we need to have an episode soon updating everyone on our lives again. Because it's been a hot minute, and sometimes I like when we just have an episode where we're just like bullshitting with each other of like whatever. So we'll have to do that too.
Yes. So season 2 is wrapping up. Next week will be our season finale. We will be taking a week hiatus just to collect ourselves, collect our thoughts, and then we will come back full force for season 3.
Season 3, baby. Oh my God.
So we will see you all same time, same place next week for the season 2 finale. This will also be a viewer topic, and we will have a guest who has some of these questions. So you will hear them live and in vivo. We're super stoked for this episode. So stay tuned. Check out our season finale next week.
Yes. Sorry, y'all. I'm like, I gotta pee, to be honest.
Pee dance.
Yeah.
All right.
But
bye.
Bye.